August 5th of 2015, I was in a motorcycle accident. On the initial impact, I exploded my L1 vertebrae, broke into multiple pieces, and crunched in on my spinal cord, causing an immediate full paraplegia from the waist down. Emergency room, they performed a 6 vertebrae spinal fusion. First, they had to go in and remove a lot of the bone fragments and sort of inspect, but they fused from T11 to, I believe, L3, and L1 was the vertebrae that was broken. I spent about 3.5 weeks in the hospital with initially no motor control, no motor function, no sensation, no ability to move, and began starting to get a little bit of sensation in my legs, higher up on my quads. I got a little bit of sensation to touch, but I still couldn't walk or move my legs. It was about 3.5 weeks. I had finally my enough motor function I had my first bowel movement, and I still hadn't been able to urinate or walk properly, but after 3.5 weeks in the hospital, I decided to continue my healing at home. At home, I was having a lot of difficulty with bowel movements, and I didn't urinate for 6.5 or 7 months on my own. I was doing self-catheters 4 to 5 times a day to drain my bladder, and through that 6 months, I did begin to get a little bit of healing in my basically general, a little bit more sensation, and primarily in the front and the front of my calves and the quads, but not so much in the hamstrings and back of the calves. About 7 months, I went to physical therapy once or twice a week, where I remember specifically when I came in and the physical therapist did muscle testing on me. She decided not to tell me at that point, but she, based on her diagnosis, said that she told me 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later that there's no way I should have been able to stand up with how weak my legs were at that point. And she felt like I was walking on willpower and motivation and discipline alone. And so I know that my legs were really weak still at that point, but I was very determined to just continue pushing and pushing. And so physical therapy for a couple months, and it sort of got to a point where it wasn't doing much. And so that initial 8 months or so was very rapid healing, and I was really excited about that. And when it started to plateau, that continued on for about a year. There was really slow and incremental changes to my function and motor capabilities. Somehow my surgery failed about 2.5 years post. So then I went back to the hospital. The titanium rod had snapped, and they removed the full surgery, removed the L1 vertebrae completely, and then added another vertebrae to make it a full 6 vertebrae fusion, jumping what would be 7, which was L1, where they installed a titanium cage instead. So following that was this whole other beginning process of healing. So that's about 3 years ago now. There was an issue for me. I'm very against taking the medications and the painkillers, and so I had a lot of battles with that, between the pain, between my own personal ideas about it, and eventually sort of surrendering to trying it and then stopping. And I felt like every time that I stopped with the medication, I started to heal faster. And so my goal was to make sure to eventually get to that point as well. So there were some moments where things were a little more, but then the pain was so extreme. I was so unhappy, and I was so angry and upset that I couldn't continue, and I kind of went back and forth there a few times. So primarily it was still plateaued, but having had that second surgery, there was a new round of muscular atrophy from an already extremely weakened leg muscle system that basically it was kind of like starting over in a way, but I already knew what was possible, so I wasn't in any kind of doubt that I'd get back to at least where I was. So that's around the time when I learned about who Dr. Joe Dispenza was at multiple different healing groups and retreats. And so now it's been about 5.5 years, and I came here with a new hope and desire to really get back to 100%. And so coming here is, yeah, by far the most healing that has happened since that initial 6 month of more rapid healing out of the hospital. So I still have a major loss of sensation, which was primarily along the rear of my legs, starting at the waist. So my gluteus and my hamstrings, there was some sensation if I pushed deep, but brushing the skin was really no sensation at all. And backs of my calves and undersides of my feet, as well as a little bit of my left foot, having a tiny bit of foot drop and really weak muscles to correct that. Both feet and ankles really weak with stabilization, and so my balance and walking is difficult. My calf muscles were very underdeveloped and atrophied. That was the status coming in, and to give a percentage of sensation, it felt like I was maybe lacking about almost 10% to 15% of my lower limbs feeling, which has been a roadblock for me in continuing to heal and do physical therapy, because my goal is to continue to strengthen these muscles, but you can't really work them if they don't fire right. So of course I had no expectations coming here, but I was open to anything and everything. And so I did have a very incredible, what I would call miraculous healing moment here on our third day of meditation, following a breathing meditation where we lay down and sort of let the body do what it wants to do and stay in this space. I laid down, my body was relaxing. I was in a very heightened, altered, and sort of connected state. And I just sort of surrendered my body and relaxed it all the way, and was in a state of almost a lucid, aware, but sort of dreamy state. And I was very intent that I didn't want to fall asleep, although it felt like that was close possibility. And at one moment, I felt myself start to drift off just for a second, and I remained conscious of the whole event, but it was just enough to initiate what was like a second of a dream, where I was stepping down with my left foot on a tile floor that was kind of wet, and my foot just slipped out, and it like completely woke me up, and it woke me up into this incredibly heightened state I was in, where I saw, my eyes were closed of course, but I saw my whole body and my leg, and my body was vibrating at this point and kind of shaking. My leg was shaking, and I'm primarily talking about my left leg because this is actually the worst of the two. And I felt almost like a burning and sort of more of a frequency through my leg, and primarily in those zones where the nerve pathways run along the backs of my legs, where I didn't have sensation and feeling. And in that same moment, there was a very clear visual experience coinciding, where I felt like I could see with my eyes closed. I could see my whole leg, and I could see it sort of pixelate and like fractalize into more like an energetic or molecular form, and it still held the form of the leg, but it was free in this way where I could, and at that same time I felt it start vibrating way more, and it completely sent me into a state where my whole body was convulsing and I was shaking and realizing that something was happening, and I didn't know exactly what it was, but it was outside of my control at this point. and I wasn't interested in controlling it. I knew that whatever was happening, I was ready for, and so I felt as if this energy was moving along what had been the pixelated leg and putting it all back together essentially. And this is of course a visualization, but coinciding with this feeling of this happening. And it was like heat and vibration and my legs shaking all the way down to the toes, and it moved from the top down all the way to the toes. And at that point, I was very aware of what was happening. I also was sort of in a very relaxed state and more of a removed from my cognitive and judgmental mind. And so I was not really thinking deeply about what was happening, but I also knew that I was scared to, because I felt like I might stop what was happening, and it felt like it was going to be something really good. So following that event, my body continued to move, and I was feeling this incredible waves of energy moving through me, and all of it felt very positive, but I wasn't sure exactly what was going on. And I did feel hopeful that it was relevant to my nerve issues and really could bring some benefit. And so I made sure not to get too overly excited for the case that maybe nothing had happened, but I sort of just laid there, and I was in such a heightened state that I didn't trust that I could feel really anything. It was all connected at that point, and I could feel everything. So to really go in and see and think would have pulled me out of the state I was in. So I sort of just laid there until the end of the meditation and the end of the laying down portion of the meditation. And I felt this kind of joy and hopefulness arising that something incredible had happened, but still refrained from jumping to conclusions. And so I just quietly started to get up and rolled my blanket up and looked around and kind of just checking in, really feeling, is there really possibly new sensation in my legs? Like, is this possible right now? And checking in and sort of in disbelief that it could happen so quickly like that. And so I remember really not wanting to speak about it, not wanting to think about it much, and just that I would get up and I would start walking, and I would know when I do that. And so I got up and I tried to sort of stay in the state I was in, and I intentionally refrained from speaking with anybody and really engaging and pulling me out of this state. And I walked out of the hall into the main hallway, and I could already tell something was different, and it was still so much energy in my body that I really could barely decipher what exactly I was feeling, but I knew that I could feel something, and it felt hot still, and it almost felt like it was burning a little bit. And so just the fact that I was feeling alone was already good, because this area had been numb for about 5.5 years now, and slowly had gotten better in some areas, but this was good news, and this seemed like something good had happened. And so as I was walking, previously I wasn't able to move my toes on my left feet individually, isolated, or all together, barely. On my right foot, my toes are pretty much permanently curled in on the right, and besides the big toe. And so when I finally got to my hotel room, and on the walk to the hotel room, I could feel that my toes were moving in my shoe as I was walking, and I felt more stable as a result. And then I could feel my pant leg on the backs of my pants. And I was so excited, I was actually concerned to make a big deal out of it, because I really just wanted to absorb this moment in a calm state and check in and make sure I knew what was going on. And so when I got back to the hotel room and I took off my shoes and I started feeling my legs, and I could feel in areas that I absolutely could not feel before. As far as to touch, the sensation was extremely limited on these areas. And then most significantly, because touch and sensation does vary time to time, whether I've stressed my back or I've slept a lot or been working really hard, it does shift and change a little bit. So the big shift that was absolutely new, that was undeniable, which really the sensation now is undeniable, but the fact that my toes moved and I could control them individually on my left foot, and that the curved toes on my right had straightened a little bit, it was to me purely miraculous. And this was on day 3, and so there's a lot of continued healing that's taken place, a lot of understanding and looking into what this means, and realizing this new relationship with this feeling and sensation. And I became aware that, yeah, I have sensation now, but the muscles didn't miraculously grow back from atrophy, and so now I can feel them, and now I can move them, and I can feel the bottoms of my feet, which I could never feel, and usually had a constant neurogenic pain, and heightened all the way out to the toes more so. That was gone, and I could feel the bottoms of my feet, and so this to me is incredibly exciting. It would be even more amazing to be able to just walk perfectly. I have a hard time walking, but what I know for sure is that now that there's sensation and movement, that I can continue this process, and that my muscles can fire correctly, and I can start to begin to retrain how I move and walk. And I'm extremely satisfied and excited about what happened.